Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 17th of April 2019 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on your screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. Now this particular article appears on page number 9. The title of the article is Clouds on the Horizon. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Indian Economy, under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Now, in the year 2007-8, the global economy was hit by a recession, consequent to which the developed economies started following unconventional monetary policies such as the zero interest rate policy, which was followed in US, the negative interest rate policy, which was followed in the countries such as Japan, European Union countries, Netherlands, Denmark, Switzerland, etc. Apart from that, Japan had even contemplated to adopt the concept of the helicopter money. Now, in spite of such unconventional monetary policies, the global economy has not come back on the track. It can be seen in the fact that various international agencies such as the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, etc. have cut down their global economic forecast for the year 2019. It is in this particular regard, this article here has highlighted certain concerns with respect to the global economic growth. Further, it has also identified the reasons for the probable global economic recession in future. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us understand the concerns raised in this article with respect to the global economic growth. Earlier, the International Monetary Fund had predicted that the global economy may grow at 3.5% for the financial year 2019. However, due to the concerns with respect to the global economic recession, the International Monetary Fund has now cut down the global economic forecast to 3.3%. So it can be argued that the cut in the global economic growth by the International Monetary Fund possibly hints towards a global economic recession in future. The global economic slowdown can also be seen in the fact that there has been slowdown in the US economy, wherein recently the Fed Bank of USA has cut down the economic growth of USA to 2.1% for the year 2019. Further, from 2008 to the first half of 2015, the US Fed Bank was following an unconventional monetary policy known as the zero interest rate policy. As part of this zero interest rate policy, the US Fed Bank was giving loans to the commercial banks in US at almost 0.25% rate of interest. However, from 2015 onwards, due to the improvement in the growth of US economy, the US Fed Bank decided to put an end to the zero interest rate policy, and subsequently it started increasing the policy rates. However, as we have seen recently that there has been slowdown in the US economy. Because of this, the US Fed Bank has now decided to put a stop to the increase in the interest rates. Hence, once again, this particular decision of the US Fed Bank possibly hints towards a slowdown in the US economy in future. Further, due to the US-China trade war as well as the growing uncertainty over the Brexit, there has been decline in the volume of international trade. For example, the World Trade Organization publishes a report known as the World Trade Outlook Indicator. Now, according to this particular report, the international trade volume was lowest in the year 2018 for the first time in the last 9 years. Now, this particular global economic slowdown raises concerns for the emerging market economies such as India. Hence, let us understand as to how the slowdown in the global economy can adversely affect the emerging market economies such as India. Let us now understand as to how the global economic slowdown can have an adverse impact on the emerging market economies such as India. The first major impact on the emerging market economies can be seen in terms of the financial market volatility. That is to say, the global economic slowdown can lead to the exchange rate volatility as well as it may have an adverse impact on the macroeconomic stability of the emerging market economies such as India. Now, this is because the foreign inflows into the emerging market economies in turn depends upon the interest rates in the developed economies. Now, this can be understood by looking at these two diagrams. So, whenever the interest rates in US change, the foreign inflows and outflows into India also change accordingly. Now, for example, whenever the US Fed Bank reduces the interest rates in US, it would mean that the rate of interest on the bonds as well as the treasury bills in US is lower. Because of the lower rate of interest, the investment in bonds as well as treasury bills would be less attractive to the investors, which means to say the investors would earn less amount of profits by investing in bonds and treasury bills in US. Now, because of this, the investors in USA would be more interested to invest in a country such as India, where the interest rates are comparatively higher. So, wherein by investing in bonds and treasury bills, the US investors will be able to make more amount of profits. So, because of this, whenever the interest rates in US are lowered, this leads to a higher inflow of dollars into India. And the higher inflow of dollars would mean that there would be a sudden appreciation in the value of the Indian currency. On the similar lines, whenever the Fed Bank of US increases the interest rates on the bonds as well as treasury bills, the US investors would find the investment in such bonds and treasury bills more attractive. Apart from that, this would show that the US economy has a higher potential for growth. Because of this particular aspect, more amount of US investors would withdraw their money from the Indian capital market and in turn invest in the bonds and treasury bills in US market. And this leads to a higher outflow of dollars, because of which there would be a sudden depreciation in the value of Indian rupee. Now, for example, recently in 2018, the US Fed Bank had decided to increase the policy rates, because of which there was sudden depreciation in the value of rupee, wherein the value of rupee had depreciated to around 74 rupees vis-a-vis dollars. So we can see clearly here that whenever the interest rates in US change, the foreign inflows and outflows into India also change accordingly. Now, because of which it can be argued that the frequent changes in the interest rates in the developed economies may lead to the exchange rate volatility, as well as it may have an adverse impact on the macroeconomic stability of India. The second concern is with respect to the global trade war, wherein countries such as US and China have decided to impose retaliatory tariffs on each other, because of which there has been decrease in the international trade volume, and such a decrease in the international trade volume can have an adverse impact on the exports from the emerging market economies such as India. So the global trade war raises concerns with respect to Indian economy, because the trade deficit in India is already negative, which means to say the value of imports into India is much higher than its exports. Now, because of the concerns related to global trade war, there could be increase in the trade deficit of India, leading to an increase in the current account deficit. The third concern is with respect to the volatility in the international crude oil prices. From the past 5 to 6 months, there has been decline in the prices of international crude oil, and this had in turn benefited the Indian economy, which is majorly dependent upon the import of crude oil. However, recently the OPEC countries have decided to impose the production cuts on the international crude oil, because of which it is expected that the prices of international crude oil can increase in future. And such an increase in the international crude oil prices may lead to a higher import bill for India. Apart from that, since crude oil is considered to be a major input for the Indian economy, wherein crude oil is used in various sectors such as industries, electricity generation, transportation, etc., because of which the increase in the international crude oil prices may in turn lead to an increase in the rate of inflation. So, with respect to the effect of global economic slowdown on countries such as India, first and foremost, it may lead to the exchange rate volatility and may affect the macroeconomic stability. Secondly, it may lead to the current account deficit. And thirdly, it may lead to an increase in the import bill as well as an increase in the rate of inflation. Further, the topic of global economic recession has been in the news from last 5 to 6 months. Because of this, one can expect questions related to the global economic recession in your upcoming prelims 2019. Now, some of the topics which are important with respect to your upcoming prelims are the types of conventional monetary policies, that is, expansionary and contractionary monetary policy. Secondly, how to boost the economic growth by increasing the money supply. The unconventional monetary policies which have been followed by developed economies such as the zero interest rate policy, negative interest rate policy, as well as the contemplation of the adoption of helicopter money by Japan. Apart from that, another topic which is important is why such unconventional policies may not actually work in order to counter the global economic slowdown. Now, all these topics have been comprehensively discussed in our DNS dated 5th of Jan 2019. So, you can go to this particular DNS in order to understand all the facets related to the global economic recession. Thus, having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 18. The title of the article is Lakes are filled with the liquid methane on Titan. This article shall be important from the perspective of prelims under the subsection General Science and Technology. Titan is the largest moon of the planet Saturn, and this particular article has highlighted that the Cassini mission has revealed that the lakes found on Titan are actually filled with the liquid methane. Hence, before understanding these interesting details related to Titan, let us first understand about the Cassini-Huygens mission. The Cassini-Huygens mission was actually launched in the year 1997, and this was a joint collaboration of NASA, European Space Agency, and the Italian Space Agency. And as to the purpose as to why this particular mission was launched, this particular mission was basically launched in order to study the planet Saturn and its unique system such as the Saturn rings. Apart from that, this mission was also launched in order to study the unique atmosphere of the Saturn's largest moon, Titan. And if one looks at this particular mission, it basically consisted of two components, that is the Cassini component, and the second component was the Huygens component. And the Cassini component was basically a orbiter which was supposed to orbit Saturn in order to provide certain important details related to Saturn's atmosphere. With respect to Huygens, Huygens was actually a probe which was supposed to land on Saturn's largest moon, Titan, in order to give more insightful details related to the Titan. Accordingly, the Cassini-Huygens mission was active in space for almost 20 years, at the end of which the Huygens probe landed on the Titan in order to give certain important details related to the atmosphere of Titan. And this particular article here has highlighted that the Huygens probe has revealed that the lakes on the Titan are actually filled with the liquid methane. In this regard, let us understand the important details which have been revealed by the Huygens probe. The Huygens probe has revealed that there are huge number of lakes, rivers as well as seas on Titan. But unlike the lakes which are found on the Earth's surface which are filled with the water, the lakes which are found on the Titan are actually filled with the liquid ethane as well as methane. So one major difference between the lakes of Titan and the lakes of Earth's surface here is that the lakes on the Titan are actually filled with the liquid ethane and methane. And the Huygens probe has revealed that such lakes are normally found in the polar regions of Titan. Apart from that, such lakes are normally found at a higher elevation since they are perched atop big hills as well as plateaus. And quite surprisingly, such lakes on Titan are quite deeper and are considered to be quite extensive. Now, what makes the existence of such lakes is interesting is because if one looks at ethane as well as methane, they are normally found in gaseous form on the Earth's surface. However, with respect to Titan, they are found in the liquid state because the climate on Titan is extremely colder. So, because of the colder climate, the ethane and methane, which are normally found in the gaseous form on the Earth's surface, are normally found in the liquid form on Titan. Now, the existence of the lakes which are filled with the liquid ethane and methane is considered to be quite significant for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the Huygens probe has revealed that there is similarity in the cycle of circulation between that of Earth as well as Titan, which means to say the methane cycle of circulation on Titan is similar to the hydrological cycle on planet Earth. Now, for example, if one looks at the hydrological cycle, the water which is found on the Earth's surface gets evaporated and travels upwards. Upon traveling upwards, it forms the clouds and ultimately it falls back onto the ground in the form of a rain. Now, with respect to Titan, the same thing can be said with respect to the methane cycle, which means to say the liquid ethane and methane found in the lakes of Titan gets evaporated, forms clouds, and ultimately fall back into the lakes in the form of the rain. Thus, one can say that there is huge similarity in the cycle of circulation between planet Earth and Titan. However, the basic difference here is that the basic constituent of cycle of circulation for planet Earth happens to be water, whereas for that of Titan, it is liquid ethane and methane. The second significance in the discovery of lakes on the Titan lies in the fact that in the entire solar system, only planet Earth and Titan have a standing bodies of the liquid on their surface, which means to say, apart from Earth and Titan, no other body in our entire solar system has a standing body of a liquid surface. However, one main difference here is that in case of Earth, the standing body is mainly composed of water, whereas in Titan, the standing body is composed of the liquid ethane and methane. And the third significance lies in the fact that the lakes of Titan are considered to be a rich source of hydrocarbons such as the natural gas. And accordingly, the scientists have estimated that the amount of hydrocarbon reserves in Titan are almost 300 times that of the planet Earth. So these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now the next article appears on page number 1. The title of the article is After the Supreme Court Trap, Election Commission Wakes Up to Its Powers. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, Governance, under the subsection Powers, Functions and Responsibilities of Various Constitutional Bodies. Before analyzing this particular article, let us first look into its background. Now, during the recent campaigning for elections, some of the politicians have been accused of making hate speeches in the name of religion. Now, in a multi-religious country such as India, such hate speeches by the politicians have a tendency to promote hatredness and animosity among the different religions. And more importantly, such hate speeches go against the secular ethos adopted by the Indian Constitution. Accordingly, a public interest litigation was filed before the Supreme Court against those hate speeches. Now, during the course of hearing of this particular PIL, the Election Commission of India argued that it is powerless and toothless in order to handle the divisive and hate speeches of the politicians, which means to say the Election Commission argued that it is not empowered to deal with the hate speeches. However, the Supreme Court of India stated that the Election Commission of India has been empowered with the superintendence, direction as well as the control of elections under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, and for which the Election Commission of India can pass orders in order to ensure smooth and transparent conduct of the political campaigning in India. What it essentially means here is that under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, the Election Commission of India has been empowered in order to tackle the hate speeches of the politicians. Accordingly, the Election Commission of India has passed the restraining orders against 4 politicians who have been accused of making hate speeches. And it has stated that these 4 politicians will not be able to do political campaigning for at least 48 to 72 hours. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us understand the various laws in India which penalize the hate speeches. So what exactly is a hate speech? So if one looks at the Indian laws do not explicitly mention the term hate speech. However, hate speech is understood to mean any kind of statement which is made against the religious beliefs, sentiments, and faith of any person or a group of community. And the hate speech basically aims to promote fear and danger among certain sections of community in India. And this hate speech in turn causes mental tension as well as stress among the community. Now, as stated before, the Indian laws do not explicitly mention the term hate speech. However, there are various laws in India which actually penalize the hate speeches. Now, for example, the Indian Penal Code 1860 has a section known as Section 153A, and this particular section prohibits the promotion of enmity among the people on the grounds of religion, race, caste, or language. And if any person tries to promote enmity among different groups of people in India, such a person can be penalized under Section 153A of the Indian Penal Code. Similarly, the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 also penalizes the promotion of enmity among the different groups of citizens in India. And more importantly, the promotion of enmity among different groups is treated as a corrupt electoral practice under the Representation of Peoples Act. Further, the Cable TV Network Regulation Act prohibits transmission of any kind of program which is dealing with the hate speeches. And lastly, under the Cinematographers Act 1952, the Board of Film Certification has been empowered in order to prohibit the screening of any kind of film which aims to promote enmity among different groups of communities in India. So these are some of the laws which penalize the hate speeches in India. Thus, having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now take up the next article. Now, this particular article appears on page number 1. The title of the article is Supreme Court to Decide on the Entry of Women into Mosque. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 1 as well as GS Paper 2. In GS Paper 1, this article shall be important from the perspective of social empowerment, whereas with respect to GS Paper 2, it shall be important from the perspective of governance, particularly related to the constitutional rights of the vulnerable sections of the Indian society. As you all must be aware, presently there is a ban on the entry of Muslim women into the mosque. Accordingly, a Muslim couple had filed for a PIL before the Supreme Court in order to lift this particular ban. And as the title of this particular article has highlighted, the Supreme Court has now decided to hear this particular plea of the Muslim couple. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us understand the petition filed by the Muslim couple and the response of the Supreme Court so far. Let us first understand the present status on the entry of Muslim women into the mosque. Now, Muslims in India belong to different factions or denominations. And among the major denominations or factions, the women belonging to the Jamaat-e-Islami faction as well as the Mujahid faction are allowed to offer prayers in the mosque. However, if one looks at the dominant Sunni faction, the women belonging to this particular faction are not allowed to enter into mosque and offer the prayers. And even in the mosque, where the Muslim women are allowed to enter and offer the prayers, it has been observed that there are separate entrances and enclosures for the men and women. And accordingly, the petitioners have argued that the Muslim women belonging to all the denominations should be allowed to enter and offer prayers in the mosque across the country. And a ban on entry of the Muslim women into the mosque is considered as a gender-based discrimination. It is because the petitioners had argued that there is no such gender-based discrimination for the prayers to be offered in Mecca, the holy city, which means to say the Muslim women belonging to all the denominations are allowed to enter and offer prayers in Mecca. Hence, accordingly, no such discrimination should take place in the mosque across India. Further, the ban on entry of Muslim women into the mosque can be considered as the violation of Article 14, which provides for the right to equality and states that no citizen in India can be discriminated on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or a place of birth. And the last argument put forward by the petitioners was the ban on entry of Muslim women into the mosque can also be considered as the violation of Article 44, which provides for the Uniform Civil Code. As you all must be aware, the Uniform Civil Code encourages the states to eliminate the discrepancies with respect to the personal laws of various religions. Now, the main idea behind this particular argument of Uniform Civil Code was that when women belonging to the other religious communities, such as Hindus, are allowed to enter the religious places, no such restriction should be imposed on the women belonging to the Muslim community. On the basis of these arguments put forward by the petitioners, the Supreme Court has decided to now hear the public interest litigation. Now, looking at the previous judgments of the Supreme Court, let us understand as to what is the stand of Supreme Court on such issues. Now, you all must be aware in the famous Sabrimala judgment, the Supreme Court had ruled that the ban on entry of women into the Sabrimala temple would amount to gender-based discrimination and also promotes the untouchability. So, if one looks at the gender-based discrimination as well as untouchability, both the gender-based discrimination as well as untouchability are prohibited under the Indian Constitution. Accordingly, the Supreme Court facilitated the entry of women into the Sabrimala temple. Similarly, earlier the Muslim women were not allowed to enter into the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Haji Ali Dargah located in Mumbai. Subsequently, based upon a PIL, the Supreme Court facilitated the entry of women into the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Haji Ali Dargah. Now, the Supreme Court of India is said to hear the PIL with respect to lifting the ban of entry of the Muslim women into the mosque. Essentially, this particular article becomes a news in transition. So, let us wait and watch as to what would be the Supreme Court verdict with respect to the entry of Muslim women into the mosque. As and when the Supreme Court comes out with a judgment, we would be discussing all the aspects related to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now, the next article appears on page number 9. The title of the article is At a Crossroads. This article shall be important mainly from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of International Importance as well as the Geography of the World, particularly with respect to the places in news. In December 2018, the people in Sudan came out on streets in large numbers in order to protest against the Sudanese government. Now, the people were basically protesting against the drastic increase in the food prices, wherein the prices of the bread had almost tripled. Now, these protest movements actually started from a place known as Atbara in Sudan, subsequent to which the protest movement engulfed the major cities of Sudan. Ultimately, now the protest movements have led to the removal of the Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir, who had come into power way back in the year 1989. It is to be noted that the recent protests in Sudan were similar to the protest movements during the Arab Spring. As some of you must be aware, the Arab Spring here basically pertains to the pro-democracy movements in the North African countries. Now, such an Arab Spring movement started from Tunisia and later went on to spread to other countries such as Libya, Egypt and so on. Now, for example, in case of Libya, the Arab Spring led to the removal of Muammar Gaddafi, whereas in Egypt, it led to the removal of Hosni Mubarak. Now, with respect to upcoming prelims, you need to note here that the recent protest movement in Sudan has led to the removal of the dictator Omar al-Bashir. And secondly, please make a note of Atbara, that is the place from which the protest movement actually started. Now, these aspects of the article are extremely important with respect to your prelims because if one looks at the previous year prelims questions, normally questions have been asked with respect to the major humanitarian crisis as well as the important places which have been in the news. Now, for example, in the year 2014, the question was, recently a series of uprisings of the people referred to as Arab Spring originally started from. And as we have discussed, the Arab Spring originally started from Tunisia and later went on to spread through the other North African states. Similarly, in Prelims 2018, there was a question related to the humanitarian crisis, wherein the question was, very recently, in which of the following countries have lakhs of people either suffered from severe famine or acute malnutrition or died due to starvation caused by war or ethnic conflicts. And the answer to this particular question was Yemen and South Sudan. On the similar lines, in the prelims 2018, there were questions related to the places in news, wherein the answer to this particular question was 1 and 4. This is because both Kirkuk as well as Mosul are located in Iraq. Similarly, with respect to this particular question, the answer was 1 and 3. So because of the nature of questions asked in the UPSC prelims, the place Atbara as well as the recent protest movements in Sudan becomes extremely important for your upcoming prelims. Now based upon our discussion, these 4 questions shall be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answers to these 4 questions. We shall be discussing the answers after 5 seconds. Now the first question here is, which among the following agencies publishes the World Trade Outlook Indicator? And as we have discussed, the World Trade Outlook Indicator is published by the World Trade Organization. Now coming to the second question, the question here is, consider the following statements. The first statement is, the unconventional monetary policies of the developed economies leads to the foreign outflows from India. Now this particular statement here is wrong. This is because whenever the developed economies follow the unconventional monetary policies of reducing the interest rates, this leads to an increase in foreign inflows into India. The second statement reads as, no country has ever adopted the negative interest rate policy and the helicopter money. It is to be noted that no country has ever adopted the helicopter money. However, countries such as Japan, Switzerland, Denmark, and the European Union countries have already adopted the negative interest rate policy, because of which this particular statement here is also wrong. So if you look at the options which are given here, the correct answer to this question is D. Now coming to the third question, the question here is, consider the following statements related to the Cassini-Huygens mission. The first statement here is, this mission was launched in order to study the planet Saturn and its system. As we have discussed, this statement here is correct. The second statement reads as, it was a joint mission of NASA, European Space Agency and the Italian Space Agency. As we have discussed, even this particular statement here is correct. So the correct answer to this question is C, that is both 1 and 2. Now coming to the fourth question, the question here is, recently a wave of protest in a place known as Atbara led to the removal of dictator in an African country. The protest movements were similar to Arab Spring movement of 2014. Identify the country given below. As we have discussed, the answer to this particular question is C, that is Sudan. Now this is to inform you that we have recently released the Prelims Compass for the Indian Polity and Governance. Now this particular magazine is available on Amazon, and the Amazon link for this particular magazine has been provided in the description box below. It is to be noted that the Prelims Compass on the Indian Polity and Governance is the fourth specialized magazine which has been released by us, wherein prior to the release of Indian Polity and Governance, we had released the Prelims Compass for Environment, the Prelims Compass for Indian Economy, and the Prelims Compass on the important government schemes. And subsequently, we will be coming out with the Prelims Compass on the Science and Technology, History, as well as the current events of national and international importance shortly. If one looks at the previous year UPSC Prelims question with respect to Indian polity, it is normally observed that the questions have been asked from the fundamental understanding of the Indian polity. Because of this, in our Prelims Compass magazine, we have included the conceptual understanding of Indian polity, wherein we have included topics such as the basics of Constitution of India, the preamble, fundamental rights, DPSPs, fundamental duties, parliamentary committees, and so on. Apart from the questions which test your fundamental understanding of Indian polity, it is observed that even the questions related to the current affairs on Indian polity have already been asked in the UPSC prelims. For example, questions have been asked with respect to the National Food Security Act, the Right to Education Act, the Lok Adalat, the Food Safety and Standard Authority, etc. Because of this, in our Prelims Focus magazine, we have also included all the important current affairs related to Indian polity. For example, some of the important articles which were in news with respect to Indian polity include demand for the statehood by Delhi, the Assam Accord, demand by some of the states such as Bihar for the special category status, etc. Further, with respect to your fundamental rights, the right to privacy as well as Article 35A were also in news for the last 1 year. On the similar lines, we have decided to include various important concepts related to the elections. Further, in UPSC prelims, questions have been asked with respect to certain landmark legislations passed by the Indian Parliament. For example, there was a question related to the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act. On the similar lines, there was a question related to the right of persons with the Disabilities Act. Because of these reasons, we have decided to include the important provisions of the landmark legislations passed by the Indian Parliament. Further, at the end of the Prelims Compass magazine, we have included a list of MCQs in order to test your knowledge. Lastly, we have also compiled all the questions related to the Indian polity and governance which were discussed in our DNS videos. Now all these compiled questions have been provided in a PDF and the link for this has been given in the description box below. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.